Hello, everyone. So happy Monday. I'm really happy that you will join me today. And I hope that you all had a lovely weekend, despite everything that is happening around the world. I hope that you had a great time with your loved ones. So today we have three main stories that I would like to bring to you. And I'm committed to keep you informed on the most important news from around the world. So today, the first one that we're going to look at is primarily the story from America. So where some of you may have seen that in April, it was reported by NBC that high-level officials from the United States and Russia held some talk to end the war. So I think that is an interesting development, and we're going to dig deep into that. The second story relates to the insane reaction, really, from the mainstream media as it relates to the movie by Jim Caviezel. My apologies if I'm not pronouncing the name properly. So the actor who played in The Passion of Christ, and we will see who's now in this new movie that has come out, I think in the US already, but here in France it's not. It's called The Sound of Freedom. We're just going to see the insane reaction from the mainstream liberal media on this movie, and then finally we're going to look at the situation in the Netherlands, and more specifically as it relates to the collapse of the government. As you may know also, so since Friday, the Prime Minister has resigned, so bringing down the whole government. So we're going to look at the reason why that happened and what might be the impact for Europe, and also just the general politics going forward. So without further ado, let's get into this. So, as I was saying, so our first story of the day is an update on the Ukraine war. I think many of you, my listeners, know my position on this specific war, as I have looked at that before. So please refer to that. It will help you understand more about this conflict, what is at stake for Russia, what is at stake for Ukraine, and what is at stake also for the other power brokers like the United States, China, or even the EU and the UK. So please check them out, and I think that you'll find that very informative. So we're gonna go straight into it, and then I'll get back to it.
Exclusive reporting by NBC News about the war in Ukraine. We've learned that a group of former U.S. officials held secret talks with the Russians back in April about bringing the conflict to an end. That's according to a group of former and current officials who were briefed on those discussions. NBC News foreign correspondent Josh Letterman broke this story. Joins us now. Josh, good to have you with us. So walk us through what you've learned about this meeting. Who was involved? What was discussed?
Well, Joe, in addition to Russia's top diplomat, Sergei Lavrov, this meeting included several former U.S. officials with deep experience from their time at the State Department, the White House, and the Pentagon, dealing not only with Russia and the former Soviet Union, but also with European issues. It also included Richard Haass, who's the outgoing president of the Council on Foreign Relations, a very prominent face of American foreign policy expertise. And we're told that on the agenda for this meeting was really finding potential off-ramps to the war in Ukraine, discussing what the reactions might be in Moscow and Washington to potential ways to move the war into ultimately peace talks that could bring an end to the hostilities. And we're told that this is one high-level example of this type of back-channel diplomacy that has been going on for some time now, involving former U.S. officials and Russians perceived to be close to the Kremlin, trying to really feel out potential solutions and engage in the kinds of conversations that are hard for the governments right now to have directly.
Yes, I mean, what's key here is these are private citizens, not in government. It's also known as track 2 diplomacy. Right. How common is this type of negotiation? Why was it preferred in this case?
Well, we should point out that these negotiations are not happening on behalf of the Biden administration. The White House is aware that these private citizens, as you pointed out, are having these discussions. They were briefed after that meeting with Lavrov in New York by the participants in that meeting about just what went on. But these citizens are doing this really on their own, and that tends to be the whole purpose of track two diplomacy, is that when you have private citizens who can sort of pass information to the government about what they're hearing, there is sometimes more flexibility when you have this informal, casual discussions than when you've got two governments sitting across the table for each other. Sometimes it's actually more difficult to break away from your talking points and really get to the meat of what potential solutions to tricky diplomatic issues could be. And so that is what these former U.S. officials are trying to do, really test the waters for potential solutions that could later be brought to track one, to direct negotiations involving Russia, the United States, and of course the government of Ukraine.
So still, Josh, we understand not everyone in the diplomatic and national security communities approved of this meeting. Why was it so divisive?
Well, the concern here, Joe, is that this could undercut the Biden administration's longstanding mantra of nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine, right? A lot of former officials and foreign policy experts have raised concerns about whether this at least creates the appearance of the U.S. or its intermediaries and Russia in the back room cutting deals that Ukraine is not directly involved in. In fact, Ukrainian officials have responded to our reporting saying that they too have that concern, that they don't want to see anybody discussing Ukraine at a table where they do not have a seat. And so the concern is whether that could potentially undermine Ukraine's ultimate leverage in peace talks as the U.S. and its allies are really starting to show that they are eager for this war to move into a different phase where we're actually talking about peace negotiations by the end of the year, Joe.
All right, great reporting, Josh.
So there you have it. You heard it for yourselves. So what's my take? I am really glad to hear about it. I think there is no other issue, no other off-ramp for other than for this war to end, really, because both sides are registering like massive casualty, even more so on the Ukrainian side. I mean, the number of people who have died, the soldiers who have died, is anywhere between 220 to 250,000. Like, those are conservative estimates, they say. In terms of the civilians' life, they're talking anything between 15,000 to 30,000 people who may have died, who are missing in action. So it really is a mess. Okay, there is no other way of putting it. It's a complete mess. But what baffles me really is that it has taken them this long because they knew right from the beginning, all these people from the UK, from the US, and or even from Brussels, from France, from Germany, all of them, they knew there was no way that the Russian will ever let Ukraine join NATO. The foreign policy establishment, both in the US, had been talking about that for at least 25 years. The last time, even President Obama in 2014 said that the US did not have any strategic interest in Ukraine. And yet, here we are. We're in a situation where people are dying unnecessarily. And I think the people who are ultimately responsible for that have a responsibility to bring this war to an end. Because I've also read more recently that BlackRock, and for those of you who don't know, BlackRock is this massive conglomerate, very involved in asset management. So they're an American company, but they have their own shares of many multinationals, so from the media, so they can control what you hear and what you see from the news. They control your entertainment. So think about Disney, for example. They have massive ownership, stakeholder. They are a massive stakeholder in Disney in terms of your movie and all the things that they're pushing. Things like ESG scores for companies. I think I'll do a video on that at some point in the future. and they also even own. They have also stakes in the biggest Russian, the top 10 Russian companies. So really, as far as I'm concerned, this war is just a farce. I'm not going to lie to you. It's just a farce so that some of those people can make money while they are busy sacrificing Ukrainians. Okay? So, for those of you who may not know, before the war, the country had roughly between 37 and 38 million people. As we speak today, there's only about 18 million people left in the country. Okay? The majority of the agricultural production, especially in the Donbass region. I think I've done the video to explain why those were strategically important to Russia, for example, and to Ukraine for that matter, in terms of the resources that are available, and which also explained why the Ukrainian really thought that if they can hold on to Bakhmut for a while, that will give them even the moral boost that they needed to boost their morale and hopefully and help them in the counteroffensive. But hey, as you've seen, doesn't really work. So it hasn't worked out very well for them. So the point that I'm making is that sadly, a lot of people are dying, while the people who actually sought to create this issue, they don't have to send their kids to die. They don't have to send their husband to die into this war. They can make money. Like I said, with a company like BlackRock now wants to move to a different phase in the conflict, really, because they realize that Ukraine has been destroyed severely enough that what's coming in terms of reconstruction, they know for sure that now they can make money. So this the world we live in here today, and it is really really sad. It is really really sad. Um, but I'm actually not surprised. I'm actually not surprised because uh, the Ukrainians should know that it is not the first time that Western countries really have done that. So, for those of you who need a history lesson, so let's hear. Um, this is going to be Madeleine Albright. It's a thing from the 90s,
We have
and then
heard
here.
that 500,000 children have died. I mean, that's more children than died in Hiroshima. And, is the price worth it?
I think this is a very hard choice, but we think the price is worth it.
So, like, as I was saying, you heard it for yourselves. 500,000 kids. That was in 96. Yeah, we can sacrifice them. It's okay. Nobody cares, right? Right now. But 200,000 dead Ukrainian soldiers. Dead. Okay? About 20 to 30,000 civilians, they say. Could be more with every passing month. Um, so it's really a mess, and it's sad that we sadly live in a world where war brings money to people, and so as long as that is how the world works, well, they will continue to sacrifice people. I'm afraid it's disgusting, but it's the reality of living in this world. But the people who are uh, somehow talking about this war all the time have no regard whatsoever for human life. If they did, they would not be pushing for this war to happen. But nevertheless, I'm glad to hear that there is progress, at least finally on that front. And then my hope is that this war will eventually end by the end of this year, so that both sides, and whether the Ukrainian especially, they can start to rebuild their own country. But honestly, it also sends alarm bells for me because I know I'm asking myself, What's next? Is that going to be Iran, the next theater of the fight? Is that going to be China? I believe it's going to be one of those. Either Iran or China will be the next war. But that is the reality. Once they've exhausted all possibility, and there isn't more Ukrainians, sadly, to sacrifice, well, they will move on, and they will find someone else to sacrifice, and then so on and so forth. So there we go. So that is it for me for this topic. And so now we're going to move on to another topic, and that is going to be related to the story that is making the news, especially in the entertainment, as it relates to the movie The Sound of Freedom. Some of you may have heard of it. So stick around, and we're going to look at that next. Thank you. So welcome back. As I was saying, our next story is related to what is happening at the moment in the US in the entertainment industry, and I'm going to react to this development or this story really about the movie The Sound of Freedom. So I don't know from here where I am here in France whether the movie is out or not, but I'm hoping that eventually perhaps I may have a chance to go and look and watch the movie. But really, my reaction today is based on what just the crazy takes that I've seen online from the mainstream media, really, and from the liberal side of the aisle, and the reason why is because this movie is about child trafficking, and it's based on the true story. But obviously, as any movie, there's people have artistic license, so some things may be exaggerated. But what I find very interesting is that it's basically the people who spend their entire life talking to you about slavery, this, slavery, that. Okay? Yet in this day and age, when you have kids, about 8 million kids who are slaves in India, about 3 million kids who are slaves in China, you have countless people being enslaved in Ghana or Nigeria, for that matter. A few years ago, because of the war in Libya, as many of you will remember, there was this reporting by CNN where people from Sub-Saharan Africa were sold in slave markets in Tripoli, okay, for as little as $100, okay. So the same people who keep talking to you about that now that suddenly the main actor in this movie, they want to accuse him of being some kind of QAnon conspiracy theorist. But the conspiracy theorists that they want you to pay attention to, they don't actually want you to remember that they are the ones who have actually said some stupid truly stupid things over the past years, as it relates to COVID, to the COVID vaccines in particular, right? As it relates to the origin of the virus, right? As it relates to the Hunter Biden laptop. So there's so many things that they've lied to you. And on the war, even now, they're lying about the war in Ukraine. A lot of propaganda is happening, but they don't want you to notice. They don't want you to notice that. And so, as it relates to this movie, okay, and we just going. So before that, I believe we should just have an idea of what is it that they basically claim that Jim Caviezel, I think his name is. So without further, so they're basically just looking at that and accusing him of being this conspiracy theory linked to Q, and that will basically make the point that talking about child trafficking is just a way for the far right. Once again, far right, as I said to many of you, is just another way of saying anybody that disagree with the liberal media agenda. And so if that's the case, please count me in, really, because I also reject the media agenda when it comes to that. So without further ado, let's get into this.
QAnon conspiracy theorists have a new backer, a man who once played Jesus. Actor Jim Caviezel pushing QAnon theories that can only be described as flat out crazy. Donny O'Sullivan is joining us now. What is he saying, Donny?
Hey, Brianna. Yeah, crazy certainly is the word for it. And what we've seen here really is that even with Trump out of the White House, conspiracy theories are continuing to grip the United States. Have a listen.
The adrenochroming of children, look, where we're at right now, hopefully we need your prayers.
He may have played the role of Jesus Christ in Mel Gibson's 2004 movie The Passion of the Christ, but now it seems actor Jim Caviezel is preaching a different kind of gospel, echoing the gospel of QAnon while speaking to a right-wing convention over the weekend.
You said adrenochrome.
Essentially, you have adrenaline in your body. I'll just simplify it. And when you are scared, you produce adrenaline. If a child knows he's going to die, his body will secrete this adrenaline.
Followers of QAnon are obsessed with the idea, without having any evidence, that Hollywood celebrities and other famous people torture children to extract adrenochrome, some believe to use in satanic ritual.
So, oh gosh, listen, I have no idea what's happening with the whatever it seems that they're saying in terms of satanic rituals. I haven't seen anything like that, but I wouldn't put that past those people. They're insane. And the reason why I'm saying they're insane, these are the same people today are busy transing your kids, so to speak. Okay? Cutting these kids' body parts like they were just some random piece of meat. Those are the people who also encourage you, like elected officials, who encourage you to tell, who are now telling you, including some people elected in Michigan, for that matter, telling you that when your children tell you who they are, you have to believe them. So if they tell you that they now identify as a bird, your duty as a parent is to affirm that nonsense. But let's continue.
It is bizarre and baseless, but it's the same kind of conspiracy theory that children are in imminent danger that in 2016 led a gunman to a pizzeria in Washington, D.C. that was the target of false online claims about child torture.
The fact that you guys are attacking us and making us look like we're crazy when we're just trying to save some fucking children pisses me off.
And the conspiracy theories continue to spread. In October, QAnon believers marched in Hollywood, repeating baseless claims. What's going on with Tom Hanks?
So you guys just want me to explain everything today, huh? Dude, it's all suspicion. That's suspicion.
How do you know that Tom Hanks is...
How do you not know? You're reporting a non-fact. Because you don't know the information, you're saying it's a fact that they're not?
But neither do you.
We're in an impasse then, because we're reporting literally the same thing.
But neither do you. But you have him on your sign. You're calling him a pedophile.
Yes.
But you don't know that for...
How did they get to that position of power?
And we should mention we have reached out to Caviezel for comment. Look, why does this all matter, guys? Well, you can see it there. People are showing up on the street about this thing. You saw Comet Ping Pong Pizza, which was also the target of conspiracy theories, a gunman showing up a few years ago. So these crazy conspiracy theories have real consequences.
Absolutely. They're so obviously just absolutely nuts, Donny. They really just are.
No, I agree. You can use the word nuts, but I think you should use the word nuts to refer to yourselves, man. I would really believe you should use the word nuts to refer to yourself, because these are the same people. Once again, I did a whole video again like a while ago. a few days ago, rather, where it is now mainstream in education to use the word MAP or the acronym MAP for minor attracted person to refer to a pedophile. And all of those people lean left, and all of these people are in Hollywood. So draw your own conclusion. So I'm willing to accept that, you know, uh, some people may go too far. But what are we to make of that? And why is it that nobody is responding to that? What are we to make of the fact that you have elected politicians on the left openly supporting the idea of performing permanent surgery on kids forever? You have the educational establishment who are also leaning left, who tell you, as I said, over and over again, or wants to redefine words like pedophile. And that those people are now joining also the rank of the alphabet community. What are we to make of that?
Why is it then they continue to circulate?
Yeah, I think particularly over the past year, because with lockdowns, etc., all of us are spending so much more time online. All of us are on Facebook all day, and that's where a lot of this stuff is spreading. But also, you can see people have an incentive to push this sort of stuff as well. You see those small dollar donations to Marjorie Taylor Greene, who pushed a conspiracy theory a few years back about Jewish space lasers causing wildfires in California. So there is an audience for it, and you could potentially make a buck off it too.
It's unbelievable to see at this point, Donny, and sickening, I have to say. Thanks so much for that report. Great work. Terrific work, as always. Sorry.
So, there you have it. So, yeah, people who actually think that they're somehow clever, but really, some of the dumbest people, I have to say, some of the dumbest people I've ever seen in my entire life. But we're going to do some further reading, and you will just see how crazy these people really sound. And as I said, so those people who keep talking to you about slavery this, slavery that, and then you bring them the story of someone who was so compelled to intervene and did intervene. These people want you to believe that this is the most evil person that has ever existed. So let's do some reading. So Sound of Freedom, a religious thriller led by the Passion of Christ. So just so how Jim Caviezel faith-based Sound of Freedom became this summer unlikely box office. So a religious thriller led by the Passion of Christ star Jim Caviezel is becoming an unlikely box office savior. The faith-based movie about child sex trafficking has collected an impressive 40 million after 6 days of release. Sound of Freedom opened last Tuesday, generating a mighty 14.2 million on the Independence Day holiday. The film picked up another 18.2 million between Friday and Sunday, enough to place third on domestic box office chart behind Insidious, The Red Door, and Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. It's playing in 2,850 North American theater, a smaller footprint than Insidious and Indiana Jones. Okay, so 3,188 theater and 4,600 theater respectively. As with our July 4th number, today's number exceeds our expectation, and we're going to continue this momentum, said Brandon Perdue, head of theater distribution at Angel Studio, the independent studio that's backing the film, in a statement. We're getting message from all over the country telling us about packed theaters, sold out theaters, and spontaneous standing ovation for the film in numerous locations. Seeing this film has become a must thanks to incredible word of mouth. Okay, so you have it there. Now, just listen to this. Inside Jim Caviezel's strange journey from Christ to QAnon crusader. Okay, just these are just trash comments. And it angers them. It truly does angers them that the movie is doing so well. So this is from The Guardian, another really stupid newspaper. Sound of Freedom, the QAnon, sorry, adjacent thriller seducing America. Jim Caviezel star is a hero trying to stop child trafficker in a paranoid new movie turning into a surprise box office hit. Type the word Sound of Freedom into Twitter and then listen to this. Decent people who wish to live good, happy lives should under no circumstances actually do this. Okay, and the search will yield dozens of triumphant reports crowing around the improbable victory of a film by that title over the likes of Indiana Jones at the box office this week. So I'm not gonna read the whole thing, but really, these people are not happy, and I don't understand why. I don't understand why people who, as I said, do not hesitate to tell you about um, about slavery every time they have the opportunity to do that, but then they bring you a story of people who were actually trafficked into prostitution, into sex crime, and most of them children, and these people don't care. So you can sacrifice kids, they wouldn't care. So yeah, this is the world that we live in now. So let me know what you guys think of this. Please, so if once again, if you like my channel, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. That will really be a great help to me. So until next time, peace. So welcome back. So our final main story of the day is what has been happening in the Netherlands. I believe this is truly fascinating. I think in the earlier segment I mentioned briefly the word ESG, and for those of you who are not aware, so here in the EU there are new laws or new framework that have been introduced and voted at the European level. That is called the Corporate Social Responsibility Directive. Now, on paper, it's something that sounds good, where on paper you would think that it is good, in fact, to take care of our environment. It is good to put in place measures to mitigate climate change. All of those things are really important discussions and topics that we should do, right? And as I said, being good stewards of our planet is something really important. But my issue is the way they're going about it. My issue is the way they're going about it because they do not understand what the social pressure they're putting on their own economies, on those families. Okay, and the story here really in the Netherlands is really telling, and I believe explains some of what follows up also on the shift that I have seen more toward the center or center right throughout Europe, whether it is in Italy, where for those who may not know, Giorgia Meloni is a really popular leader in Italy, despite the fact that for years and years people had said, well, they're not ready. People on political parties on the right were not necessarily ready to lead and all of that. But as it turns out, she's done a fantastic job, at least so far. And so we've seen the same push in Sweden, more to the right. We've seen the same push we've seen the same push also in Germany. We've seen the same in Finland, and even here in France for a while. So we are going to unpack all of that, and we will try to understand exactly how did we get here, what has happened, what is at stake going forward. Okay, so without further ado, let's get into this. So we're going to try and understand why this government collapse. And the first story really is related to this. So I think it started about last year, to put things into context. So for those of you who don't know how farming work, for example, right? So you would have a field, and in your field you will put fertilizer. For example, one of the big fertilizers is potassium. Okay, now potassium is really good when you're using it as a fertilizer, but it does also have an impact on the environment, as any activities, human activity that we have. So it will pollute. It will tend, if it is not in a controlled amount, it will tend, for example, to pollute on the ground stream of water. It can pollute reservoir, and it can create problems. So it is useful, as I stated, to put in place a framework to make sure that this type of emissions do not cause problems ultimately for the environment, okay, for the people who live there. So that is key. So I don't have a problem with that. But then what the Dutch then have done, and one more thing. So the Netherlands is by far, in terms of how efficient the agricultural sector is by far the best in Europe. Okay, in terms of the efficiency. So you have a lot of people, a lot of men especially, who are employed in this industry. So therefore, what happened was that the Dutch government decided last year that they will try to bring down the use of potassium in the farming industry, in a bid to be more environmentally friendly and all of that. Now, bringing the use of of potassium down by 50% by 2030 meant that a lot of those farms were going to be abandoned. So then we brings the question, what do you do with all those people who are employed? All those families whose well-being depend on the income that is generated from farming. So, or the question is also, so you say no to farming, as you think that perhaps it has a massive impact on the environment. Okay, but then how do you make sure that a country that up to now didn't have was very self-sufficient in terms of producing its own food and the export, because they also do export a lot in the other countries like Belgium, France, to just name a few. What do you do then? So you cannot bring that sort of disruption to the entire ecosystem without and yet think that there's not going to be any consequences. So that is the backdrop to this story. Okay, and please stick with me, and I'm going to talk to you more also about the impact of that as it relates to ESG score for emerging markets. Okay, so let's carry on. So pro farmer party wins big in Dutch election after protest over emission regulation. Okay, so action against new climate laws in the Netherlands has spurred the popularity of a new political party. Farmers in the Netherlands have attracted global attention by blocking roads, dumping manure, and protesting outside the houses of politicians. Now, a farmer-friendly political party, Boerburger, I'm going to butcher it, I'm not going to attempt, has landed a major victory in provincial elections on March 15 to appoint members of the Dutch Senate. The rural party finished ahead of Prime Minister Mark Rutte, People's Party for Freedom and Democracy. The victory has called into question support for climate policies meant to limit the country's nitrogen emission. It also means that the Triple B is now the third largest political forces in the Netherlands. So it will be very interesting if these people actually come to power and form a coalition government. Okay, so and the reason was, so more than 10,000 joined fresh protest on Saturday, the 11th of March, ahead of the election. Many were flying the country's flag upside down in a symbolic representation of the movement, because quite frankly, they're crazy. They're walking on their heads if they think they can get away with it. They say that the new regulation to cut nitrogen emission have been exaggerated, and current proposals to solve the problem are unfair and ineffective. So Rutte has committed to having nitrogen emission in the Netherlands, has committed to halving nitrogen emission in the Netherlands by 2030. The level of nitrogen oxide in the country's air and water are currently higher than EU regulation allow. Okay. So a lot of these emissions come from the waste produced by the country, more than 100 million cows, pigs, and chickens. Despite its small size, the Netherlands is the world's second biggest exporter of agricultural product by value, behind the US. Okay, so to cut nitrogen emission, the government plans to reduce livestock number by a third, which could mean some farmers face compulsory buyouts. Despite many in rural regions acknowledging the significance of the climate crisis, Rutte has been criticized for the sudden announcement of these agricultural plans. So this is the problem that I have basically with climate activists. It is not that the issue doesn't need to be dealt with. Okay, that's not the issue. The issue is not that people don't realize that we need to intervene and we need to do something. The problem is that they are not doing it in a way that is smart, taking into account the social impact, because ultimately you think that it's a good thing to have, because they happen to be mostly men. Do you think that it is a good thing to have 30 or 40-year-old men, for example, who will sit idle and not being productive member? You will see insane level of suicides happening. So that's the problem. They're not thinking in ways that are actually smart and realistic about reducing those emissions in a way that, shall we say, that are even done appropriately, to make sure that you have the least disruption as possible to the entire economic ecosystem. So that is the problem, really. That's the problem that we're facing. And I think they are not being realistic about that. Okay, so they need to go back to the drawing board and they need to examine it and move forward, taking into account social consideration. And that's the difference between climate alarmism, I believe, and well thought policies. So you just pump the brakes and we wait until we figure out a way of doing it in a way that is safe, and with, again, once again, with the least disruption to the social fabric. Because just saying or thinking that in 7 years you'll be able to halve the emissions, and then you're not going to get any major disruption to the food supply, to social cohesion, that is just dumb. It's not going to happen. So, and that's the story. And I think there is a way for them to look at that, and yet they don't want to. The other issue, really, with the Dutch farmer was also the issue of immigration, because his party refused to compromise on two policies that would have created two-tier immigration system in terms of the number of people who were allowed to join the families, for example, in the Netherlands, and the people who were not allowed to do that. So it would have created two tracks. But then the members of the coalition government are like, we don't really want that. We're not really going with you along this plan. So instead of making instead of really compromising on that, the current prime minister that just decided to bring down the whole government. So his whole government all were forced to submit their resignation. Now, why is this important? So I mentioned the shift towards the right that is happening in Europe. And the other thing that has become very clear to me as relates to France, for example, where we've seen record number of distraction happening just during the riots following Nahel's death. So it is right to try and understand why, because my take, and I think I've covered that in a previous video, one of the reasons why it is like that, it's because there is no social cohesion. There's no social cohesion between different ethnic groups. There's no identity that people can actually say and claim that despite your origin or your ethnic background or whatever, there has to be something that makes that community tick or stick together. And when you don't have that social cohesion, so what happens is that people then turn to their individuality. So you form groups along those individualities. So which is exactly what you saw here happening in France for the past 40 years, where there are entire communities of people who migrated first, second generation, and sometimes third generation, and yet these people struggle really hard. They struggle very much because and they all tend to go in the same area, which then put pressure on the infrastructure in these areas. So I will probably do another video on the topic to just show you, for example, in France, where there were schools that were left really in terrible conditions, and according to the reports, like even the toilets were not in conditions that normally you would be happy to have your kids in, and it's so terrible. But that is the reality. So we need to have this type of conversation with people on what do we do with immigration as relates to the social fabric. And the people who don't want to have this conversation and who are only interested by fear of what they perceive to be only things that can be seized by racist people on the far right, I believe they're making a mistake. We've seen it in France, and France can help serve as a warning of what not to do, in my opinion. We need important debate that happen. We need to rediscover again what, for example, will solidify social cohesion. And if we can't, then it's a problem. If there is nothing that sort of underpins that social cohesion, a society cannot function, cannot prosper. And it was so apparent to me when I looked at the riot that happened even here in France. So a lot of things have to be changed, and if they don't, I really fear that the shift was going to be so radical that that a lot of things will change. So that's it for me. I believe that people need to pay attention more with regard to what is happening. So that's my take. I would love to hear from you guys, what you make of this situation. So once again, please don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, and share my video with your friends and family. And I want to say to every single one of you, I appreciate you, and I hope that you enjoy my commentary. So until next time, peace.